we're titling this video, Life Kicks More Asses Than It Kisses, which sounds kind of harsh, but I think it's really important for parents to understand that this journey that you and I have been on, it has been a long journey. It's not always been a great journey. There's been struggles, but you made it.
Yeah, it's been struggling for you.
Yeah, I mean, there are times I think when you're a parent of autism where you wonder who's having the harder time, the kid with autism or the parent. And I think because as a parent, we have all of these, like, even if we try not to, all of these hopes and dreams and ideas for our kids. And then you get the diagnosis, or even because in our case, we didn't have a diagnosis for a long time, you go, wait a minute, this isn't exactly what I thought it would be. But then I think if you can let go of that, it can be so much more than what, because it takes you on a journey. And I think spiritually, I've always felt like sort of when you were born, God sort of opened the universe to me. And with each child, I learned something new. I used to say that you were like my moon and that Jacob was my stars. And I can't remember what I said about Ellie. Probably that she was stars too. But that each of you brought something different to me and teaching me how to be a mom. And you, with autism, taught me how to be a mom different than Jacob did. And there were things like as a mom of autism that you think, oh my gosh, this is autism. And then you have the next child and you're like, nope, it was just regular behavior. It was just a kid being an idiot. It was just a kid being, and even deeper than that, because you and Sam are the same temperament.
Yeah.
Then there are things that Sam does and I'm like, it's just that temperament. It's just being phlegmatic. It's just the temperament that's speaking. It's not autism. It's not neurotypical. It's just the temperament speaking.
It's just the laziness part.
Yeah, that is not present because in all kids with autism, because there are a lot of kids with autism that kind of have Jacob's end of things with more ADHD stuff. And I mean, has that been your experience? And because I know you're working with, Harry's working with some, I should introduce him. This is my son, Harry. I've never been on camera before.
A long time ago I was.
Yeah, this is very true.
When we went to that Indian temple, I was.
Yes, that's true.
I wasn't happy during that time.
No, that was a hard day.
It was a very hard day.
It was a hard day.
There was nothing that I could enjoy eating.
I know he had a hard time because,
I'll eat a lot of stuff now, though.
It was really hard. That was a hard day for sure, but that's really funny. So that was really hard. So that was like the last time that you were probably in a video. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But I think what I want to say is that you have been working with you went on a mission for our church, and that gave you a lot of sort of fodder for like thinking about how these people, these children grow up and they don't get the kind of like help that they need from their parents. Yeah, and definitely. It was really frustrating for you. And now you're working with people.
It was very frustrating, just like seeing where they came from and how clueless they somewhat felt. And I never wanted to be offensive and say, hey, dude, it sounds like you've got autism.
Right. Well, and I think too, it's important to note that in our church, before you send a kid on a mission, there's a box that you have to check. Has your child ever been diagnosed with autism or autism spectrum disorder? And I checked the box.
Yeah. Because
that would trigger it then to make sure because then you had to go to some counseling sessions to make sure that you were stable to go.
I wasn't going to get angry.
Right.
Wasn't that what you told me, that I wouldn't get angry?
That you wouldn't, like, because there were times that I worried you would just run away. You'd be like, I'm done. Just
there was a few times where I was wanting to run away.
Sure, because there's a lot of, like, understanding personalities, whether you're neurotypical or have autism.
Yeah.
But you had some experiences on your mission that I think you would write home and say, these kids have autism and their mothers never helped them. They really needed you to be their mom kind of thing, which really makes me laugh. But I think that it would be good to have you talk about some of the people you're working with now and just sort of what you're experiencing as an adult man with Asperger's, which they don't even use that term anymore.
I don't. Well, some people do. I've talked to I'm helping out this guy right now. He's in his mid-20s, so he's a little bit older than I am. He's got some other health problems, and I won't go into deep of that, but like, it's just really interesting. Some people, if they were diagnosed young, they will still use Asperger's as opposed to just regular autism, because on social media, because I use social media a lot, and sometimes I use that to kind of like take a look at how autism participates in social media, and there's a lot of like, I'm surprised with how many people on the spectrum are just on social media engaging.
I love the meme you sent me. In fact, I copied
That
it
was
today.
pretty good.
You sent me this meme that was, it was like 2 different blocks, and the first one was my window, or my computer is open, and my browser has 17 tabs, and what was it, like 4 of them are, and one of them's playing music, and I don't know which one's playing music, and that's like how his brain works.
Opening up. Because I looked at it, it's like my mind is like an internet browser, 17 tabs are open, 4 of them are frozen, and I don't know where the music is coming from.
Right. I think that's a really good description. Like, as a mom with like growing, like watching you grow up, there were many times where I was like, he hears me, but it's not registering. And so we came up with some things that I think were really helpful. And I know there's some moms now that'll be like, but we came up with a lot of things. Like, I remember when you were really little, you used to say, I feel wiggly. And that was, do you remember that? And
I vaguely remember that.
That was like that was my cue to be like, oh crap, I better stop what I'm doing because something's going to happen. I got to figure out what's going on with Harry. But that you were able to like vocalize that. I think that was the first thing that I remember on my journey as a parent of autism, of realizing that when you said that, I needed to pay attention because that was kind of your cry for help. That was your like, I'm getting overstimulated, or I can't function. And so that was my cue to stop. And that was really helpful to me as a parent.
I think the graduation from that was my instructions are blurry, because like we were
right.
we were in front of
I think you're like 9 or 10.
We were like in front of a Toys R Us,
right?
And you had just randomly decided to tell me, like, Harry, if you're ever having trouble, because I love Legos, and I'm getting back into Legos now, so I remember this, like, Harry, if you're ever having trouble, you need to tell me your instructions are blurry and you don't understand it. I was like, okay.
And that made a lot of sense to you. I remember that day because that was the day that Dad lost it in the Target parking lot. Do you remember that day, Dad? You guys do you remember that day?
I just remember the scene because we were in the car. Can't remember if it was raining or not, but like you had told me
it was raining. It was fall. It was fall, and we had gone to Target, and you and Jacob often would it was like electric. Like you'd bump up against one another, and I'd be like, "Could you just not touch each other, please?" And sometimes it'd be fine, and you weren't being naughty, but it was like you were like having like a repetitive statement to the dump, to the dump, to the dump, to the dump.
Pretty much.
And Dad said, "Stop saying to the dump," and you said, "I'm not saying that. This is what I'm saying," and he lost it. Like I think there were like people in the Target parking lot. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know anybody could yell at their child that loud," and he felt so bad because he was still on my stepdad's isn't mean he's just adjusting phase.
Yes.
And so I remember we went to the car, and then we drove to Toys R Us, and I said, "Harry and I are going to sit in the car. You guys go in." And then I remember having that conversation. I remember that was a really hard conversation for me because you asked me things like, "How did I get this?" And you asked me things like, "Will I always have it?" Do you remember asking me?
I don't remember those questions. I just
typical 9, 10-year-old questions like trying to sort out, this is life, and am I always going to feel like? Because I think there were probably many times where you were like, "Why am I always in trouble? Why do I get in trouble so much?"
Sometimes I was like that because I felt
feeling
like that was normal.
Feeling bad about being in trouble.
Yeah.
And so I think the Lego instructions thing was really helpful because you could then tell me my instructions are blurry.
Yeah.
Or I could ask you, "Are your instructions blurry?" And you could say. But I remember too, like long before even the "you feel wiggly" thing, you wouldn't be, and this is pretty classic and you do it well now, but most kids with autism won't make eye contact.
They don't make eye contact.
But you and I worked on that for a lot of years.
Most adults, something I've noticed just doing research with autism stuff is most adults won't even look you in the eye if they have autism and they haven't worked at it. So it's just if you can look at somebody and they won't look you in the eyes, you can tell there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect because they don't want you to see them.
That's one of those first things to think about. I also think that when you were really little and didn't want to look me in the eye, when I gave instructions, you had to look at my mouth. Do you remember me saying that? Look at my mouth.
And then eventually graduated to look at me in the eye.
Yeah, because I knew that it was too hard. But if you saw my mouth, then it was like the instruction, like we synced.
Okay, yeah.
The instructions got to you. So, I mean, I think that those are big tools that really helped us. I think, too, I remember going to a couple of support groups and coming home feeling like, that was crap. You didn't go with me. It was just a parent support group. I remember thinking, these people just sit here and complain about their kid with autism all the time. And that was not where I was. I did not want to be in the let's compare autism horror stories. I wanted to be in the what are you doing for your kid place? And there were not, I mean, granted, that was a while ago. You're 22 now. That was probably 15 years ago. And it was exhausting at that point. And so I'm pretty stubborn. I just was like, well, I'm going to figure it out.
You wanted to find solutions instead of trying to complain, to push the subject away.
Yeah, because I really, really and truly, at the end of the day, just wanted you to be able to live a normal, awesome life, to grow up and have a wife and be on that path. And you're going to have bumps just like everybody else has bumps. But that your bumps would be ones where you felt like, hey, I can ask for help. Where a lot of neurotypical people don't flip and ask for help.
No.
And they need to.
Not these days.
No, they don't. And so if they can't find it on Google, then they just assume it doesn't exist.
Right.
So, I think that like my methods with you they came out of, we had a friend who was an occupational therapist that he worked at a school with kids that had much worse autism than you did. And he would always like feed me little bits. And we were talking about them before, like and you don't remember this, but he would, and Eric, you might remember this. Do you remember when I used to make him wear headphones and listen to classical music for 10 minutes a day?
I do.
Because the whole idea was that it would stretch you in something you really hated, but you knew you could get over it. You knew you could get to the next place. And you were probably, I think you were about 9 to 10 when we were doing that. And there were days when your dad came home for lunch and I would just be bawling. And I remember one day just I was pregnant with Sam. I just bawled and I said, he is going to live with us forever. And Dad said, no, he's not.
He's not.
We are going to sort this out. We're going to figure this out. Not just from the perspective of, oh my gosh, what do we do with a child that's an adult and he lives with us forever? But really from the perspective of, we wanted you to have a full life. And it was really depressing to think that you couldn't. And to think that there was this thing that was in the way. And so we did a lot to help you, helping you make eye contact. And then I remember you were about 11 or 12 when we did the 5 people a day. You had to make 5 contacts a day. He had to make 5 non-family contacts a day.
Yeah.
I remember one time we sat down in the movie theater and we'd all gone to the Dollar Theater to,
I remember.
Do you remember? And when you have 5 children, and I guess we only had 4 at the time because I think Sam was little.
Just a child.
He was just tiny. And I when you have that many kids, the popcorn goes before the movie even starts.
Yeah.
And I remember it had just passed back to me and it was empty and you were sitting right here and I said, go ask them to fill up the popcorn. And do you remember your response?
I don't.
He said, I already made my 5 contacts today. And I remember saying, get your butt up and go get popcorn so that everybody can have popcorn. I don't care if you've already made your 5 contacts. And at that point, I think you have this shift of, oh, it's okay to make more than 5 contacts a day.
Probably, yeah.
So you were very much in the mark the box, made 5 contacts, don't have to talk to anybody else. And after that, it sort of opened this new space of needing to, be able to make other contacts. What would you say to somebody who has a kid that has dietary restrictions and they're in the space where when you were 12 and 13 where you were like, I'm going to try it anyway?
What do you mean? Like what would you say to parents that are struggling with that?
Yeah, as they watch their kids, because it's really hard. I remember calling one of your church leaders one time and saying, if you ever feed my kid red dye and wheat at the same time again, he could spend the night at your house. You never came home like that again.
That's funny.
Because you would come home and you would know that you had gotten into something and you would go right to bed so you could sleep it off.
Yes.
But that was probably more like 15, 16, because you were 17 when we moved to San Diego, so that was probably more like 15, 16.
Yeah, definitely. What would I say? It's definitely something you just got to keep at, because if you give up, not gonna move on. You gotta. Something I've learned is you've gotta really. You gotta be gentle enough to know you still love them, but also be hard enough to let them know that I want you to succeed. And if I'm not hard on you, you're not gonna succeed. And I think that's a really hard line to keep a balance of. I think with the nice thing about today's world is it's really easy to find alternatives to a lot of different things. Granted, not every alternatives are perfect. They still need to find a good bread.
You mean like food-wise?
Food-wise,
right.
yes. Food-wise, alternatives are really hard to. Well, they're actually a lot easier to find.
They're a lot easier than when you were a little kid. When you were a little kid, my gosh, we were like stuck
eating rice cakes as a kid.
Rice cakes and mung bean patties. Do you remember that?
These are nasty.
You really liked it. You're like, more fried sauce, please.
Everybody at work's like, do you want rice cakes? Everybody at work likes to work out, and I was like, I hate rice cakes.
You ate way too
I
many.
ate way too many of them as kids. I hate them.
Rice cakes, peanut butter, rice cakes, jam, rice cakes. Yeah, there's not very many ways that you can dress up rice cakes year after year after year.
No, not really.
Yeah, no. So there are probably things that you're like, nope, don't ever need to do that again.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, that there are so many like alternatives now. I think that diet plays an important part, and we kept your diet really clean for a long time. And then when I got divorced, your birth father did not keep your diet clean at all.
I think it was definitely a couple hard years, and
that was a real struggle. I think those were your hardest autism years.
And I think they were probably magnified by the fact that when you diet is one of the most fundamental parts of keeping your autism in check, and it's something that living alone you really have to work on keeping, because you go to the store and you don't even think about the things you're buying, and so you look at the labels and you really struggle with things you want to buy. But I think those were hard times, because James didn't care about making sure that was done. So he cared about us in a sense, but the care really didn't extend so far as making sure that I was still healthy at the end of the day.
I remember one time a judge asked him, is there any reason why you can't feed your son a normal meal? And he got real quiet. Because that's what it had to come down to. And I encourage moms that have those struggles with an ex-partner that they take it to that place and that they ask the question. Because if you have a care plan laid out for you by a doctor, then there's no reason why that your child can't be fed appropriately. And I just remember the look on his face was like, crap, you mean he can't eat hamburger buns because that's what he wants? I remember thinking.
I remember that.
I remember you coming home sometimes and you would be high as a kite, And remember, it would be so hard. It would be so hard sometimes. And we would have a whole day that was like detox, not just from being at the other parent's house, but because you had to come down dietary-wise.
Come down from all the screens, come down from the diet issues, and from the lack of parental guidance and all that kind of stuff.
So that was really hard. So I think
definitely
for the people that are watching that have that as a struggle, I think you put it in your care plan with your lawyer and your guardian ad litem that your child needs to have those things in place. You cannot control everything that happens. I mean, I finally was to a place where I gave up. But what's interesting to me is when you stopped going to his house, it was your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wouldn't help you with you were struggling with screen addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, part of the issue with autism, or one of the big addictions that I think a lot of autistic people struggle with, and again, I've seen this a lot with my time on social media and kind of doing a slow study of it in general, is autistic people really get high on screens and that addiction with screens, and not so much for me anymore. I get more bored these days of
you play through something really
fast.
Well,
I do. I play, I just got the new Zelda game, and I played through it in 3 or 4 days, and now I haven't touched it since. So it's I play games and I zip through them, and it has to be a game that can take me a long, long time for me to stay hooked on
Well,
it.
and a lot of that is you have reflexes that some of us don't have.
Yeah.
And like a memory of things. I can remember when Dad and I first got married. It was at Mega Man, and you were all about Mega Man, and he would play it.
I was.
And he would go to work during the day, and you would draw maps for him while he was gone.
He built
And-
Legos.
I did
He built
too.
levels
Yeah.
out of Legos.
I did.
And he would come home, and then you'd be like, okay, this is what you need to do tonight when you play the game. And then, you would give him this whole like rundown because you had memorized the map in your head.
I did.
And so I think for somebody that it would take, a neurotypical person generally months to get through a game, you go through
Without
it fast.
looking it up, because these days
Right.
most people just look it up before they do it.
Right.
Most people just look it up and then they do it and all that
That's
kind of stuff.
because the cheats are made for the neurotypical people. The cheats are made for people like us.
Right.
Do you know how many times in the Goose Game I had to look something up?
You played the Goose Game.
Not all of it.
Not all of it.
No, I'm not
Someone
on
did
that
a
one, too.
world record of that in 2 minutes. And
That's
30
really
seconds.
crazy. They probably have autism.
Anyway, going back to screen time, it's something that you really got to manage. I think that I definitely hated the amount of screen time I got with you because it wasn't what I felt was proper.
It wasn't enough.
But these days, it really doesn't make much of a difference because I get bored of it really easily. And maybe that's because my mind is, wanting to always be active. And when the game stops being fun, I got to find something else to be active and stuff.
So contrast that though. I think we did like a couple of hours a week, which you're already telling me was not enough as a child.
Well, it's not
It
bad.
is not. It is enough. It is enough. But when you were at his house, it was nonstop screen from the time you got there.
Pretty much.
So it fed that addictive space.
It did, yeah. And I think part of the problem with that is it still wasn't enough because there were 3 of us and only so many screens. And when you didn't get to do what you wanted to do all the time, it fed into that addictiveness, that addiction thing that you feel when your body craves something. And then when you finally get to it, it fed into that as well because we were all kind of pitted against each other of wanting to have
Right.
time on the screens. And I think now that I don't have that, it's not an issue because I come home from work and I'll hang out on the computer and the computer will be on regardless of whether or not I'm doing something on it, doing something in the background because I like having white noise while I'm doing stuff. But it's not that big of an issue anymore because I'm not in a competition for screen time.
That makes total sense. And I had actually never thought about that so much of that was from a competition. What would you say, because healthy autism brain is a screen-free brain, even for children today. So, we really worked to keep you so busy that you didn't have that, even though you're remembering it as not having enough time. We really worked to try to keep you guys busy.
Yeah.
So that, we were at the park, we were going for walks, we were doing things so that we were trying to keep you going so that your mind wasn't there. What would you recommend to a parent that is in that spot that is screen-free or seeking to be screen-free to keep the child's brain going? Because
Keep them going? I'd say doing something with your hands because, with ADHD and all that kind of stuff, I think a lot of kids are misdiagnosed with ADHD back then and nowadays would probably be given the autism treatment. But you need to do something with your hands because all the time when I'm at work, when I'm at home, I need to be doing something with my hands. That's why I like being on the computer a lot, or when I'm at work, when I get bored, or when it's hot outside, I take off my watch and I'm just holding my watch in my hand.
something to do with your hands.
So, building blocks, Legos, something that keeps your child busy and working, especially when they're getting older, they need to be doing stuff. They may not be, the whole being active thing, it's not every autistic kid wants to be lazy. I know there are some autistic people that I know that are there was one I heard of that is really good at surfing. And all he does is surfing every single day. So
it's his temperament.
it's because you're not always going to get a lazy autistic kid. You're going to get one that wants to be out there.
Right.
So I
Busy.
think if you want to remain screen free, the best thing to do is find something to do both with their mind and their hands.
I think that's great. I was thinking, we were talking about this a minute ago, you were my best knitter.
Mm-hmm.
We would be doing, scriptures as a family and reading as a family, and you would be the only one sitting there knitting, and you would get stuff done because it was keeping your hands busy. You weren't disruptive, and you were probably you're probably 14 at that time, keeping your hands busy. And it was always crazy to me that you could have your hands busy, you could read something and listen to something at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that.
Well, I think it's just the way that the autistic minds are built up. I think it's easy for us to get out of focus if there's not a couple of different sources going on at the same time to help us keep focused. So like I listen to music or I listen to YouTube or to shows while I'm doing something, and it helps me keep focused, because for some reason, if I'm not listening to something else, the focus is somewhat broken or shifted.
That's
and
interesting.
so like with me doing my meditations right now, because I started meditating, I think one of the biggest struggles for me is I'm not doing anything with my hands because I'm trying to keep still for 45 minutes to an hour.
I wonder if you still have a fidget spinner.
I do have a fidget cube and a fidget spinner.
I wonder if you did that, if that would be too distracting in your meditation.
I could try that, but one of the biggest struggles for autistic people, I feel, is if they don't have some sort of background noise to help them concentrate. This is not in all scenarios, because I've seen in some scenarios you don't need any white noise and you just need to plain concentrate. But in general, if you have something in the background, it really helps out with your concentration.
It's interesting.
But that background noise should not be distracting you from what you're doing. So if you do want to play something to help keep concentration, you should also be playing something that doesn't distract you from what you're doing.
That's a really good point. Because I think that it's easy to be like, oh, I need to listen to the radio, but I would think the radio would be too distracting versus like a playlist that you can anticipate and you know what songs are there, right?
For me, I listen to a lot of instrumental stuff like video game music, not a lot of lyrics. Like I look at my library, I don't have a lot of lyrics. If I am listening to lyrical music, it's typically when I'm doing something that doesn't require a lot of thought. Like when I'm driving at work, I listen to a lot of lyrical music because it doesn't require too much thought. I mean, driving requires enough thought that you want to pay attention, but listening to lyrical music will not take my attention away from that.
That's really
so when you're finding something to listen to, choose something that's probably without words, because because words will force you to read them out while you're listening to them.
Right, because you have to think more about
you have to think about the words, the meaning of the song. But if you're just listening to something with instruments, you don't have to pull too much attention away to focus on that.
And that you just brought up an interesting point, because I think a lot of neurotypical people don't listen to the words.
They probably don't.
They might sing the song, they might like the beat, but you're in almost a constant place of dissecting what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really interesting. And I remember when he left on his mission thinking, crap, I am not going to remember where I parked my car for 2 years. Because you were always like, you always knew. I never paid attention to where we parked. You always knew where we parked.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very rarely were you wrong. You were paid a lot of attention to detail.
Yeah, pretty much.
Daddy, do you think there's anything we've missed?
I don't think so.
I think this is a really good first discussion. I think that if you're watching this, I hope that if you have questions, that you'll ask them, because I know Harry would come in and chat with us again.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
And it's really easy. And I do think that back to our title about life kicking more asses than it kisses, what would you say are your top 3 takeaways from your childhood that you think help you today?
Top 3 takeaways. That's kind of a tough one.
If there's more than 3, then.
Well, it's just I'm trying to think. Top 3 takeaways is you did everything because you wanted me to succeed. I think that's one of the most important things that some autistic people struggle with. And I think a really important point, and I feel like you did a good job with this, by the way, you need to convey why you do what you do. Because I know, again, pulling back to people I observe off social media or in the world, I see a lot of people that are upset with their parents because they don't feel like they loved them, or they don't understand why they did the things they did. And then some parents just don't care. I think if you want to raise a child that both loves you and loves the world, you need to convey, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. You may not understand it and you may not like it, but I'm teaching you these skills because I believe this is what's going to make you successful. And you are going to have to leave some of it up to the kid, because the kid has got free will and they can decide for themselves. And
you've got to fall down and make your own mistakes.
Yes, and not all of them are going to be like, okay, I completely understand, because for a while I didn't understand what you were doing. I thought that you hated me. Some days I thought you hated me. I think it's important.
That's all right. Some days I thought you hated me. You probably did.
Oh, a few days I probably did. Not like in a real
You know what?
hate, but
You wouldn't. We wouldn't have a normal mother-son relationship if that was not the case. I
yes,
don't think.
definitely. So I think it's important to tell them that you love them, which is why you do what you do. I think it's also important to find a balance in what you do and not be overbearing. I think a good thing to do is to give some freedoms to kind of gauge where the child is at, because autism is such a big line that you don't really know where your child sits, and it's
Yeah.
going to be really hard to say find someone with the same capacity as I do as compared to some other people, because when I was on my mission there were some kids that I was like, man, this kid is way behind, or this kid really, I don't know if he's behind because that's like how his brain works, or if his parents didn't work on him. So I think there needs to be a lot of experimentation. Don't just take my experiences for face value, because not every adult with autism is going to be in my position. There's going to be some that unfortunately can't live on their own. And
Sure, absolutely. And I think when we were thinking of that, of course, like part of that was I was pregnant with Sam and I was way overly emotional.
yeah,
But I think that when you see your child, it's important to see your child and not see autism every time. And I think that that's really one of the reasons why I stopped going to those support groups too, is because every time I looked at you, I didn't want to see autism. I just wanted to see Harry.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like right around the time that we had this conversation, you asked me something about, like, can you just see me and not see autism? And I remember thinking, that's a really very forward-thinking thing for a young child to say. Like, do you just see me, or do you see autism all the time? And I think that you can, if all you're doing is constantly researching autism and constantly looking for the next thing and constantly, oh my gosh, we have to have this cure, we have to have this, we have to have that.
You're going to forget who the child is.
Right. And I think that looking at autism from a place of, oh, we have to have a cure, I think makes it seem like you're broken. And I don't think you're broken. I think that there are things that you do every day to manage it. And, some of them are about anxiety and some of them are about diet. And those are just things that you do to manage it. Mm-hmm. But to say that we have to find a cure in a way that puts it in the same category as, say, cancer, means that there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And there's not something wrong.
Right. I definitely think as in terms to a cure, the diet and the gut is probably
so huge.
The most important part. On my good days at work, it's usually when I have a good gut. On my bad days when I'm upset, it's usually because I have a bad gut and I've eaten or done things that are bad for my system. I think that's also one of the probably my third takeaway is your child's health is probably the most important. If you can raise them and they're not going to like all the foods that you give them, trust me, some of the foods I ate really sucked.
There was a long time where your diet was like 5 things. I'm like, oh my gosh. He's gonna want to eat chicken nuggets forever.
Pretty much.
But then what's interesting is you had this turn. When you were 17, you went to work at Legoland.
Yeah.
And he would come home and say, I ate an avocado today. And I'd be like, who are you? Like, you never would have eaten that on your own. So that was part of that very appropriate teenage piece of moving away from your parents. Mm-hmm. I just didn't know I would see it with you because there was things that in your development that I didn't see until much later or at all compared to your neurotypical siblings. And so when you would come home and say, hey, I was doing this, I was so shocked and so happy because it was like this normal, natural space for you to step away from family. Mm-hmm. I can cook my own food. I can experiment on my own. Mm-hmm. I can, like, all of those things that sometimes when you're a parent of an autistic kid, you wonder if that's ever going to happen.
Definitely. Expect the unexpected with stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think when I went on my mission, which is where I had the most growth with my diet, and in fact I joked a lot with parents who had kids that only ate 5 or 6 things. I'll be like, don't worry, he'll get it. He'll grow out of it eventually. And then I'd pause it and be like, hopefully he grows out of it eventually. Because like, so when I was on my mission, so many parents complained to me, like, if you guys don't eat, you won't end up like the missionaries one day, because the missionaries don't complain about what they eat. And I don't think I ever did. I think I pretty much ate everything that I was handed, and that included strawberries. I remember the first night, it was like a year and a half into my mission. No, it was about a year into my mission, and this older couple offered us strawberries. I don't know if it was dessert or if it was just a regular thing, but they offered us strawberries. I looked at my companion because I was a little afraid, and then I just put one in my mouth because I was like, one, I don't want to offend this family, and two, I've never honestly eaten strawberries in my life.
The seeds always.
And the seeds were honestly the worst part. Because I ate it, and then when I left, I told my companion, I was like, that was the first time I ever eaten strawberries. And he was dumbfounded because he's like, what the heck is wrong with you? And I'm like, well, here's the thing, the seeds is what scared me the most. He's like, do you like strawberries? I was like, I'll never eat them on my own, but if somebody offers them, that's fine with me. So I think...
I'm laughing too because on the flip side of that, we had an autistic missionary when Dad was the mission leader when you were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so bad because he came to our house and I offered them strawberries. And he ate one and there was a worm in it. So like his strawberry experience, because me, I like buy organic everything and they had come from the farmer's market. I felt really bad.
That sucks.
I know.
If that was my experience with strawberries, I'd be like, man, I'm not eating strawberries ever again.
Okay, that's really
At least it's not like the spiders in the banana.
No spiders in the dang banana.
No, well, the rumor is that they're at the very end of the banana, and nobody eats the end of bananas anyway.
On the inside?
Well, I don't know if it's on the inside or the outside.
Okay, that's just gross. There's no spiders on my bananas.
Well, probably not on your bananas. But
don't tell Soraya that. That's
no,
the
I won't
fruit
tell
she'll
Soraya
eat.
that. Don't worry. Tell Soraya that.
Fruit she'll eat. Well, thank you, dear.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming in, chatting. I think that you're an amazing human.
Thanks.
I want you to tell people what you do for a living because I think oftentimes too moms are like, I don't know what kind of job they're going to have. And when you left on your mission, you wanted to be a professor.
Somewhat, yeah. Somewhat.
When you came home, that's not what you wanted to be.
When I came home, I didn't know what I wanted to do again.
Yeah, because it was like Dad called you blank human.
I think the interesting thing, and maybe it's not with every autistic person, is just like we have a hard time deciding what we want to do. And when I came home and I started doing the online college stuff, I was really depressed because I don't want to be in school. I want to be doing.
Right.
I don't want to be stuck here. I want to be doing. And I don't think I realized that I wanted to be doing. I think I just wanted to be left alone after coming home for a while.
Sure.
But
you had been alone for 2 years, so.
Well, I had been alone with another guy for 2 years. So now it recognizing that my body just wanted to go out and do more things.
That's very valid.
Is definitely. But anyway, I do full-time security, armed full-time security.
Mm-hmm. The state of California trusts him to carry a gun, and he has autism, and so I trust him to carry a gun.
The state of California trusts me because I took a test saying that I'm not crazy.
You're not crazy, and you know how to shoot. And you know how to use your gun.
I do know. It's really crazy. I thought I was gonna suck at shooting, but and maybe maybe I'm weird in how. Because I don't feel like I'm bad at shooting, but I don't know if I'm good at shooting on other people's standards. But I figured it's like all you got to do is take a couple shots and then figure out where your because everybody has this spot where you shoot, and it's not going to be the center no matter how much you aim. Mm-hmm. And once you figure out where that spot is and you're consistently shooting in that spot, you just got to shift your movement so that you can hit in the center. So
very logical. The other job that you had that you liked for a while was he worked for the post office sorting.
I worked at the post office for 6 weeks.
That was you came home and I was like, this is an autistic person's dream. Sorting all day. You loved it.
Yeah. I think part of the problem I had with that job is I didn't get as much training as I probably would have liked. It is something I go back and do, although I think that the market for that is probably past because all of the old people are retired and a lot of the new kids are already in that profession. So that's something that I probably missed the boat on for my specific one, because there's going to be plenty of people. You
sat for the civil service test for that. And I think that often when moms are thinking about long term, oh no, what are they going to do for a living? Yes, college is an option for sure if that makes your child happy. But there are plenty of other things that I think most people wouldn't think to do. Mm-hmm. And you really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I mean, to go and sort and to be in the mail system, you enjoyed that. You're enjoying security. You thought about being a train operator.
I thought about it. One of my bosses, and he knows a lot about autism too. I don't know if he was in his family. He told me, he's like, you really shouldn't be a train operator because you actually would be a lot happier working on the trains yourself. And I think
That's interesting.
I could do that. I'm just too lazy to go back to college and
to do the engineering.
math and do the engineering and do the math stuff. But that's definitely something I think I could do good at. And I think autistic people everywhere could do good at jobs like that. And college is college is one of those things where you don't really need to push your kid into college. You could I'd rather see a bunch of autistic kids going into trade schools because there's a lot of trades that you do with your hands, like plumbing, welding, building, all these things that you could go into a trading school to do, and they make way better than just going
they make
into
a lot of
college.
money for sure. And I think too, your next stop is he's going to sit for the PD exam.
It's called the NPost exam. I believe it's in Utah. That's the only place that I've seen it.
So
pop up.
that's his goal for next year. So I think that's a great goal. I wanted to express that because I think a lot of times moms are like, I don't know what they're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna work at McDonald's their whole life.
Oh man, that's too.
And you worked food service, but you worked in enough to be like, I'm done with that.
I think the funny thing is when you're a younger kid. When I was young, I really didn't want to go very far because I was lazy and I didn't want to get out there. But I think when you get a taste of complete laziness, which I got partially when I came home, I decided that I didn't want that. I decided that I got to keep moving because I get depressed when I'm just sitting around all day. And I think most autistic people will feel that. They'll feel like my life is unfulfilled. And they could honestly go either two ways. They could continue to be unfulfilled and go down a path of depression, or they could decide, I actually am going to get up and go do something.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I do. Thank you. I love you.
Love you too.
Ask questions. We'll come back. Bye.
Bye.